afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this Hong Kong Arts Festival online event, presenting two great Czech composers, Martinů and Janáček. We are now actually at the concert hall of the Hong Kong Academy for Performing Arts with a small live audience here, so I will be addressing them as well. Now, today's topic is intimacy and obsession in Janáček's and Martinú's string quartets. This is the official title. And what I would like to add is quite simply that, yes, we're going to talk about obsession and intimacy, but I have actually changed it to in the music of Janáček and Martinů, in the sense that I will be using examples also beyond the string quartets. But today we have two live quartets here to demonstrate, two student quartets, the Rivendell Quartet and the Gotham Quartet. So, the idea of intimacy and obsession. Composers of all ages seem to have a need to feel love in abundance in order to produce their most inspirational works. And it seems best when the kind of love relationship is a challenging one, or even unrequited, or at least very much one-sided. Perhaps the pain of longing, yearning, and craving is the catalyst for producing their most potent creative juices. In Stravinsky's own words, and I quote, "In order to create, there must be a dynamic force. And what force is more potent than love?" Unquote. We can easily cite many composers who thrived under the pain of longing and fantasizing, like Beethoven with his immortal beloved, whoever she is, and Brahms with Clara Schumann, and Berlioz with Harriet Smithson, Mahler with Alma, his own wife. Many of them produced their most groundbreaking works at the height of their heartbreaks. So, like Berlioz wrote Symphonie Fantastique at the height of his obsession with Harriet Smithson. Mahler produced Das Lied von der Erde when his 7-year-old daughter died and when he learned that his wife Alma was having an affair. And Bach, actually, wrote the monumental Chaconne when his first wife died. This phenomenon of thriving creatively under extreme emotional pain seems also to apply to the two composers in our talk today, the two Czech composers Bohuslav Martinů and Leos Janáček. So today, I intend to explore this extraordinary phenomenon that composers seem to share through the music of Martinů and Janáček. I will not only simply examine their lives in historic or biographical terms, but also to examine their music, to discover how their emotional obsessions and yearning for intimacy reveal themselves in their musical compositions. The two works chosen as examples to be performed live today are the two string quartets, Janáček's second string quartet entitled Intimate Letters, and the lesser-known work by Martinů, his fifth string quartet. And they will be played by the two student string quartets in the School of Music at the Hong Kong APA, the Rivendell Quartet, and then later the Gotham Quartet. Now, as Martinů is generally a lesser-known composer than Janáček, I will start with him first, and to introduce him as Martinů the man, to start with. So, here's Martinů. He was born in 1890 and died in 1959. Quite a nice-looking man. So in Martinů's most recent biography, entitled Compulsion to Compose, by F. James Ripker, the author explored Martinů's life from the point of view of a physician, because James Ripker is a qualified medical practitioner and son of a close friend of Martinů's. So this is the biography called Compulsion to Compose, published in 2011. So the author was actually a family friend of Martinů. So he actually knew Martinů in person when he was a child. So recollecting the experiences he had with Martinů, he observes that much of his behavior resembled that of individuals diagnosed with autism, and more specifically with Asperger's syndrome. His point of view is that his state of mind, the state of mind he possessed, compelled him to compose continuously, a kind of obsessive behavior. It is well known that Martinů produced well over 400 works in his lifetime, well above average for its time. But even before this biography came out, we know that Martinů grew up in an unconventional environment which might have contributed to his somewhat wayward personality. He was born and brought up in a church tower in a small town called Polička. So this is the church tower that he was born in. So already a bit of a peculiar child, he was shy and sickly. He grew up looking at the world from afar, from up on the tower, detached from the rest of the world. So he lived this little bit that at the top of the spike. That's where he lived, and he and his family lived until he was age 12. So Martinů himself acknowledged later in his life that this had profound effect on how he related to the world around him and how he composed. Much of his best music is dreamlike. It is unsurprising that he was more drawn to the music of the French Impressionists, especially Debussy, rather than to his natural forefathers Smetana, Dvořák, Janáček, or the Germanic school of composers. The ultimate music of dreams of Martinů's is undoubtedly his opera Giulietta, a most beautiful opera by any standards, and one hopes that the Hong Kong Arts Festival will one day bring it to Hong Kong. This opera is actually called Giulietta with the subtitle, The Key of Dreams, and it is one of Martinů's most surrealistic works. But Martinů's dreaminess seems to go hand in hand with his obsessions. Perhaps these were signs that led to James Ripker's suspicions of Asperger's in Martinů. Aside from a compulsion to compose, his obsession towards an object of love seems to be as strong. And this had been a source of great inspiration to some of his most seminal works. In 1937, when Martinů was 47 years old and residing in Paris, he met the young composer Vítězslava Kapralova. Oops, I forgot to show you Martinů as a young man. I think you look at this photo and you can see his personality. And some of our own violinists may need to teach him to hold the violin bow properly as well. So anyway, now in 1937, he met the young composer Vítězslava Kapralova. Kapralova came to study with Martinů, having won a grant to study in Paris. She was 22, 25 years junior to Martinů. Kapralova was a brilliant young composer in her own right and a conductor, which is very unusual at the time to be a female conductor. Actually, it is unusual even now. So she was a daughter of a prominent Czech composer, Václav Kapral, who incidentally was a student of Janáček. Kapralova and Martinů did sustain a teacher-student relationship, but at the same time, Martinů became completely obsessed with Kapralova, quite obviously drawn to her immense talent, good looks, and youth. One must point out that Martinů was already married at the time, and Kapralova, seeing that the relationship with Martinů could never truly flourish, married the Czech writer Jiří Mucha, which broke Martinů's heart. All this took place in a short space of 3 years because the Second World War ensued and Kapralova contracted tuberculosis and met a very untimely death at the age of 25. So one can imagine what a whirlwind of a love affair this must have been, full of passion and pain. And it is easy to see why Martinů would have been so attractive to Kapralova, a decided brilliant musician who could understand his musical thoughts and someone who appreciates his creativity while looking upon him as her guide, her carer. Martinú's wife was not a musician at all. This whirlwind had inspired Martinů to produce some of his most inspired works in his entire career, the Tre Ricercari, the Concerto Grosso, and most importantly, the groundbreaking double concerto for piano, timpani, and 2-string orchestras. This work, this piece, remains Martinú's most performed work up to this day. At the same time, he wrote the 5th String Quartet, a work that he explicitly dedicated to Kapralova and is a product of deep personal experience, full of pathos. Because of the war, the manuscript was apparently lost, and sensitive to Martinú's wife's feelings, this work was in fact not performed until 20 years later, in 1958. When writing for classical genres like the string quartet and later the symphonies, Martinů follows closely the forms of the classical masters. This string quartet is in 4 movements, just like any classical string quartet, and each movement is written in perfect classical forms. Actually, in terms of formal treatment, Beethoven was Martinú's model. This string quartet is known to be quartet number 5 in G minor, so it actually has a very strong tonal center as well. For today, we would like to illustrate a few points of Martinú's obsession as well as intimacy through the second movement of this quartet. It is written as an adagio with a very sweet and soulful melodic theme, but most importantly, it is the viola line that gives us the best hint at Martinú's obsessional thoughts. So now may I invite the Rivendell Quartet to give the first example, and I'd like them to play the first 7 bars of this movement. And please notice that while the 3 parts play a very nice melody with very normal accompaniment, as one would say, the viola has a very high C sharp and played pizzicato, and it's something as if it's very disturbing, as if it doesn't belong to the rest of the parts. So please, can we just hear the first 7 bars of this movement? Yes. If you didn't know the program behind this quartet, you might think, oh, it's the viola making a noise again. But actually, that's exactly how Martinů wanted to be. And it's actually marked poco forte, meaning that he wants it to be heard actually above the other parts. So this incessant C sharp continues for a large part of the movement in different octaves, and in one section joined by the cello in C natural, making it even more dissonant and uncomfortable. And then the cello takes on a D flat, which is equal to C sharp, and continue this obsessional train of thought. The obsessional motif takes on other pitches and also other methods of playing as we go along. But for now, I'd like to ask the quartet to play another section of the movement, which shows how Martinů is expressing this obsessional idea suddenly dissolving into a moment of intimacy. Okay, so I think you can hear suddenly he becomes, it's a much more gentle feeling, and it's very intimate. And then from that, there is, he works himself up to a frenzy and passion at its highest intensity. So the intimacy actually doesn't last for very long. It's getting really, really anxious and passionate. So after this heightened passion, the whole thing transforms into feelings of love, pure love. And you can hear that the instruments are intertwined with each other. And you can imagine like two people being very together, very intimate, very intertwined. Thank you. After all this, the uneasy, obsessional motif, and this time a C natural in the viola and D flat in the cello, returns. The movement actually ends with a beautiful melodic idea in the first violin, but that D flat or C sharp appears again, now played con legno by the viola. However, the last chord, if you would hear, is quite simply a poignant C minor chord. So for those whose ears are well tuned, it would be nice for you to actually follow this obsession motif and see where it goes and how it is transformed through the movement. But one could hear clearly that the obsession with Kapralova is not an easy one. It's painful. But his love for her is soulful, passionate, pure, and beautiful. All this can be so easily discerned in the music. So let's hear the movement in full. So now on to Janáček. While Martinů was by nature someone outwardly cool and detached, but with enormous bottled-up energy that became intensely obsessional, Janáček was an explicitly passionate individual and composer. He had a much more conventional upbringing and music education, and unlike Martinů, he was recognized as a supreme musical talent from a young age. His operas are romantic and realistic. They are portrayals of deep human emotions without sparing the audience of any details, to the point of extreme poignancy and pain. But also, at other times, he expresses utmost joy to the point of ecstasy. His first successful opera, Jenůfer, is a case in point. His music is melodic, yet very individual in character and style. Many have commented on his use of speech rhythms, that is, motivic patterns that simply imitate that of speech. The way he spoke, in particular, sometimes, I would say. These speech-like motivic cells infiltrate into his compositions in most ingenious ways, making his music most distinct and easily distinguishable from other composers. There are short, abrupt motifs, often repetitive, knitting into longer phrases. This is very characteristic of Janáček's compositions. And I'd like the Gotham Quartet to just play two examples out of this Janáček quartet. The first is in the very end of the second movement, the last 9 bars, and you will hear these very abrupt motifs that I'm talking about. Lovely. So in this already, there are four notes, da-da-da-dum, da-da-da-dum. We don't really know what speech he is imitating, but it could very well be miluję, which in Czech means I love you, I love you. So, there are many 4-syllable words in Czech, or it can be naskladanu. You can hear that it is all kind of crumbled up. It's not like Cantonese or German or English that's very clear. It's like, that is sort of the style. So I'd like them to just play the last 3 bars of the third movement. It's another little snippets of this kind of thing. A very anxious, I love you, I love you, I love you, kind of thing in Czech. So this is a very passionate man. Janáček's 6-string quartet, Intimate Letters, almost needs no introduction. It's called Intimate Letters. So unlike Martinů's secret love for Kapralova, Janáček's love for a married woman 38 years his junior was no secret, not even to his wife, Kamila Stösslová. So Kamila Stösslová was Janáček's muse for over 10 years. They met in 1917, and it is well known that Janáček wrote over 700 letters to her during that period. The inspiration behind this string quartet, his second, was these love letters that Janáček wrote to Kamila. There was no hiding of this fact. Janáček actually gave the title to the second string quartet out of his own will and design. It is his public acknowledgement of his deep love for Kamila, without any reserve, without any qualms. So actually, while Martinů's wife was not a musician and he fell in love with a supreme young composer, Janáček's wife was a musician, and then he fell deeply in love with someone who was not a musician at all. And in fact, she did not appreciate Janáček's music, and she didn't understand music very much at all. So Janáček actually started writing this quartet on a day when he thought he might have lost Kamila. In desperation, he wrote 3 letters to her in the same day, in that one day. In the time of writing, Janáček was 74 years old in the year 1928. What Janáček would not have anticipated was that he also died in that same year. It was as if he had poured all his fiery life energy into the music, then simply expired. Janáček's music is dramatic and erratic. It is a direct reflection of his life. On the 17th of February 1928, when Janáček was about to complete his string quartet, he wrote to Kamila to say, and I quote, "I'm now putting the finishing touches on those love letters so that everybody will understand them. Here they kissed, there they longed for one another. Here they gave change to one another. Here they said they belonged to each other forever. Perhaps people will guess this," unquote. Janáček meant his music to be as graphic as this, as directly corresponding to his feelings, his actions. It is perhaps because of this technique of musical communication that Janáček's music is so vivid and hits our hearts so directly and so powerfully. For today, we will perform the 3rd movement of the quartet. In Janáček's own words, he described to Kamila, and I quote, "I'm writing the 3rd of the love letters, for it to be very cheerful and then dissolve into a vision which would resemble your image, transparent, as if in the mist, in which there should be the suspicion of motherhood," unquote. Janáček was such a romantic and so full of fanciful ideas that he wrote the string quartet with a viola part to be played by the viola d'amore, the viola of love, as he explained to Kamila. It was only at the first playthrough of the finished score that Janáček realized that it was an impractical solution, and so retracted the idea and replaced the part with a normal viola. The movement opens with a rather obsessional repetition of a single rhythmic idea, with all parts written in rhythmic unison. That is no counterpoint. The viola was the first to break away in a little play from very, very high up on the viola. It's like a little dance of its own. Is this the portrayal of Kamila in a cheerful mood and then dissolving into her image in a mist? Lovely. The rest of the movement is full of sudden changes of tempi, of emotional outbursts, characteristic of Janáček's most mature works. As Janáček claimed, the emotional expression of each section is clearly communicated, so we can easily guess each individual's section's meaning. So now let's hear the third movement of Janáček's Intimate Letters in full and enjoy listening to these beautiful, intimate, and passionate moments that Janáček shared with Kamila. They are all there, clearly to be heard. Thank you very much. That's terrific playing. So you can hear there's a lot of direct, lyrical, and powerful music in Janáček's music. And this kind of display can also be heard in the opera Janúfa, as well as the Cunning Little Vixen. These are two offerings by the Hong Kong Arts Festival this year that you can't possibly miss. So we have the final slide of showing Janáček and Kamila. So they each even posed to take this picture, so there's no secret about their relationship, basically. So this year, 11th to the 14th of March, you can hear his opera Janúfa online, or the Cunning Little Vixen on the 13th and 16th of March. And at the same time, if you are interested to hear some more quartets, the Pavel Haas Quartet will be performing Martinů's seventh quartet, and then Janáček's first quartet, so not this one, and also a Dvořák quartet on the 16th to the 19th of March. I would like to thank the Hong Kong Arts Festival for giving us the opportunity to give this short demonstration to learn a little bit more about these two brilliant Czech composers. This is just to whet your appetite of the special qualities in their music. We hope that you will be inspired to discover more of their works and take every opportunity to hear performances of their masterpieces. Thank you all for listening. Martinů particularly is not heard very much, not very often, not even in Europe, let alone in Hong Kong. But I think you can hear, his music is actually really, really special. And he has, as I said, written over 400 works. Maybe not each single one is so spectacular, but a good proportion is. So do explore more of Martinů's music. He has written for almost every instrument and many very interesting combinations in chamber groups as well. Not to say like the double concerto that we played last year. And then Janáček, of course, I think you all are familiar with Janáček's music, but maybe also not played very often. And the other day I asked somebody whether you know the piano piece In the Mist, which is actually quite popular, quite well known, but I don't think I've heard students here play that. And also the song cycle, I suppose I could say, called the, what is it called? The Diary of One Who Disappeared. It's very, very difficult, but it's another piece, another work that Janáček wrote with Kamila in mind, basically. So this is just what I've been talking about today is an aspect of their lives, of course. It's not everything. But it is interesting that, for instance, Martinů, that just those 3 years of great passion, he really produced some of his best works in those short 3 years. And then Janáček, since he was obsessed with Kamila for over 10 years, so for a long period, he produced really great work after great work, and many of them inspired by this woman. So there we are. Be inspired by each other, and don't be afraid to pour out your passion when you're playing as well. So I think this, doing this little talk, it has also changed their playing a little bit. That they have the courage to actually pour out their emotion more. because if you don't do that, then it's not the music. That's not what the composers are writing. You know, it's so obvious that that is the expression of the music. So, thank you very much, and thank you for coming.